Welcome! Today we're going over every single song that Taylor Swift has written about Harry Styles or has referenced him in, and we're going to jump straight in and start off by going over the tiers I've made for this video. The first tier being Come On Now, aka songs that are most definitely about Harry Styles, even if Taylor hasn't word for word confirmed them. The second tier is Probably, but maybe not. That's self-explanatory. There's some heavy hints in there, but there's a world in which they could perhaps not be about Harry. The third tier is Evidence, no. Vibes, yes, also I think very self-explanatory. And the final tier is Honorary Mentions, which are songs that I think have been rumored to be about him, or that I felt the need to just go over because they at first glance look like they could be about him, but in my personal opinion, they aren't. Before we get into the songs, let's just do a really quick rundown of the Harry Styles and Taylor Swift timeline. So they met in March of 2012 at the Kids' Choice Awards. Later that same week, Justin Bieber invited both Taylor and One Direction to his house, and then said something on the lines of, "One of the biggest artists in the world thinks Harry is so hot, but I've been sworn to secrecy." Harry is continually bullied in a lot of One Direction interviews whenever Taylor is mentioned and just teased about her in general. He also says that he got her number and that they are friends. However, the rumors about them come to a halt when Harry is photographed kissing a model in April of 2012 by the paparazzi, and that's sort of the last we hear about them, also because One Direction goes on tour. Taylor then starts dating Connor Kennedy in July of 2012. And then 6 months after they were last seen together, Harry and Taylor reconnect in September 2012 when One Direction watches a rehearsal of Taylor's, and then they share a meal with Ed Sheeran and the bandmates. Then in October, it's revealed that Taylor and her boyfriend Connor Kennedy actually parted ways quite a while ago, not specified when, and that there were no hard feelings. On October 7th, they both perform at the London's Radio Teen Awards and then spent a suspicious amount of time together backstage. Then on October 30th, Harry wore his famous airplane necklace, and then by November 7th, Taylor was spotted wearing it, confirming the rumors that they were in fact dating, because why the heck do they have matching necklaces, or why are they wearing the same necklace? In December, they went on a bunch of highly publicized dates. They went on their park date. They went and met each other's families at their hometowns. They also went on a skiing holiday and then had a really public kiss in New York Times Square on New Year's Eve. Then on January 5th, they split up while on holiday, and there's an iconic photo of Taylor Swift sitting in a blue dress on a boat, supposedly returning from her vacation alone right after Harry broke up with her, but that's just theorized. And that's the last we hear of them publicly interacting until August of 2013, where Taylor wins a VMA, says thank you to the subject of the song, and then Harry's in the audience, and that's that. Starting off with Style, perhaps the most obvious song on this list. Everybody back when it was released thought that this was about Harry Styles, mostly due to the fact that it was literally called Style. But there are also an immense number of references in the lyrics that point to a very specific relationship of Taylor's with Harry Styles. So first, let's look at the general meaning of the song. It is, first of all, about a very on and off relationship. Fade into view, it's been a while since I have even heard from you, and when we go crashing down, we come back every time, sort of solidifies this fact. It also has hints of the media, or this relationship being highly publicized. She starts the song off with "Midnight, you come and pick me up, no headlights," indicating that he's picking her up in secret, because why else would you turn off your headlights? Let's dissect the whole theme of never going out of style as well. There's an interview in which Taylor said, "When I wrote this next song, I was thinking about how we have these fashion staples that we never quite throw them out of our closet, right? I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking about how there are feelings like that, and how there are trends that never go out of style." And also, she said, "Style is a song that I wrote about observing fashion trends and cultural trends and seeing how there are certain things that are constant. There are certain people that float in and out of your life, sort of like a trend that keeps coming back in style and never fully fades away." Now, these are evasive answers, and do I think that she was telling the truth? I mean, yeah, sure, I can see how your feelings for someone can go in and out of style, but I think what this probably was referencing was the incredible amount of media publicity that was surrounding her and Harry's relationship. And of course, when she's asked about this in an interview, she's going to dodge the question a little bit. So I'm sure it has a double meaning, but also "we never go out of style" is most likely referencing the tabloids. Moving on, the lyric "you got that James Dean daydream look in your eye and I got that red lip classic thing that you like" also caught everybody's attention because people thought that Harry's appearance and James Dean's whole vibe really matched, especially when she says "you got that long hair, slicked back white t-shirt." There's literally a photo of Harry with slicked back hair and a white t-shirt, and he has pretty long hair, so that's definitely feasible. Also, in a song of Harry's called "Two Ghosts," He says same lips red, same eyes blue, same white shirt, couple more tattoos, using the same style that Taylor uses in this song, just flipped around. He's describing the girl first, same lips red, same eyes blue, and then the guy, same white shirt, literally the same exact thing that she says in style, couple more tattoos. Now, there's people that think that this song is about somebody else, and I'm not going to go into that here, but I think it's just a fun parallel to keep in mind that Harry does have a song that literally copies what Style does, but switches it around. Finally, Taylor also mentions that she's heard that this guy has been out and about with some other girl. First of all, you can hear these things from your friends, but you can also hear them from the tabloids, which I'd imagine hurts much more. So what happened with Harry and Taylor is that they met in March of 2012, but they really didn't start dating until November of 2012. And a lot of people think that the reason that they didn't start dating right away was because something happened between them, but then Harry was spotted or papped kissing another girl, and that essentially ended their relationship. And Harry even said in November of 2012, quote, "If you're shown in the papers with other girls when you really like someone else, that's difficult." So I'm just going to leave that there. I think that was very relevant to their situation. There's also an Easter egg in the music video for Style where for a couple frames, and then actually again for a couple frames, a paper airplane necklace is shown in Taylor's hand. And coincidentally, Taylor and Harry wore matching paper airplane necklaces, or maybe it was the same necklace, I'm actually not sure. But the point is they were sharing it, or they were wearing matching ones, and it was something that they were papped doing multiple times. So this was like a thing in their relationship. And this is also mentioned in Out of the Woods, where Taylor says, "Your necklace hanging from my neck, 2 paper airplanes flying," which is why I think that song is practically confirmed to be about Harry as well, but we'll discuss that later. Anyway, point being, in the music video for this song, she literally shows the paper airplane necklace, which to me is a subtle confirmation that the song is referencing Harry, if people, didn't catch on to the literal name of the song. Finally, I'm just going to go over some interesting parallels in style to both One Direction and Harry and also Taylor's other songs. These aren't, I'm pretty sure these happened by accident. However, they're still fun, so I'm still going to mention them. Don't come for me. She says, "Come and pick me up, no headlights, long drive." I've noticed she really likes to reference vehicles, which she does in Out of the Woods as well in relation to Harry, because she says, "Remember when you hit the brakes too soon." This is something that I'd like you to keep in mind when we discuss future songs that may not be as obvious, but might still use the same lyrical metaphors. For instance, a car. She says, "Can't stop thinking about you and I." One Direction has a very popular single called You and I, which was released 6 months prior. She also says "Take Me Home," and One Direction has an album called "Take Me Home." These are reaches, of course, but also Taylor really pays attention to this stuff, so it's not completely a 0% chance that she literally did this on purpose. There's also something suspicious about the Perfect music video for One Direction. If we look at the music video for Style, it's filmed in a very particular format, namely a lot of projections and a lot of visual, illusions. And if we look at Perfect, right during the bridge, there's a clip of Harry where he sings, "And if you're looking for someone to write your breakup songs about, baby, I'm perfect." And this is the only section in the video that has just a projection of clouds up on the hotel room, which I thought was a very interesting coincidence. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe it wasn't. But it's literally Harry singing that specific line, and the style of the video is the same. Finally, there's a parallel to Blank Space where Taylor says, "So it's going to be forever, or it's going to go down in flames," and in Style she says, "Could end in burning flames or paradise." I don't think this is necessarily a nod to the fact that the song is about the same person, but more of a stylistic choice she did on 1989, where a lot of songs have these interchangeable parallels. Now, moving on, I'm just going to read the 2 remaining quotes that Taylor had about the meanings of this song, because I think it's fun to listen to her and what she actually has to say about it. She said, "This song is about those relationships that are never really done. You always have that person, that one person who you might feel might interrupt your wedding and be like, 'Don't do it because we're not over yet.' I think everybody has that one person who floats in and out of their life, and the narrative is never truly over," which is definitely reflected in the on and off relationship that we see in the lyrics. She also says, "I loved comparing these timeless visuals with a feeling that never goes out of style. It's basically one of those relationships that always is a bit off. My previous albums have also been sort of like, I was right, you were wrong. What happens when you grow up is you realize the rules in a relationship are very blurred and that it gets very complicated very quickly, and there was not a case of who was right and who was wrong." So just keep in mind that Taylor has said this about this particular song, and so this is what her relationship with Harry was like as we go through and vibe out what the rest of the songs are about and if they're about the same situation as this. Moving on to Out of the Woods. I'm going to start this off by saying that I think the song is about Harry because she mentions the plain necklaces in a very obvious manner. The song also mentions an on and off relationship, like we just discussed, and more particularly, a relationship that keeps being threatened by the press. This is evident in lyrics such as Baby, Like We Stood a Chance, indicating that there was something in the way of their relationship. And she also asks, are we in the clear yet? Taylor has spoken about there being obstacles to her relationship being thrown at her by the public. And I think here she's asking, are we in the clear yet? Or is there going to be some other difficulty thrown at us because of our statuses or something like that? In fact, when talking about the song, she literally said, and that song touches on a huge sense of anxiety that was coursing through that particular relationship because we really felt the heat of every single person in the media thinking they could draw up the narrative of what we were going through and debate and speculate. I don't think it's ever going to be easy for me to find love and block out all those screaming voices. She also says it always felt like, okay, what's the next roadblock? What's the next thing that's going to deter this? How long do we have before this turns into an awful mess and we break up? Which is essentially what I just said about that are we in the clear yet line. I think that's what that is referencing. Next, she says the famous lyric, remember when you hit the brakes too soon, 20 stitches in the hospital room. First of all, a lot of people assumed that this was a real physical accident, and honestly, they were right to do so because Taylor said that line is in there because it's not only the actual literal narration of what has happened in a particular relationship I was in, it's also a metaphor. Hit the brakes too soon could mean the relationship ended sooner than it should have because there was a lot of fear involved. And so yes, it's a metaphor, but also this actually happened. So what can we take from that? Well, in her Rolling Stone interview, she said that the lyric was inspired by a snowmobile ride with an ex who lost control and wrecked it so badly that she saw her life flash before her eyes. And so there was a ski trip that she went on with Harry, and later everybody found out that he actually came back with a bandage on his chin. So take from that what you will. I think that's a very interesting coincidence, but also going off of the fact that this lyric is also a metaphor for the relationship stopping too soon, it implies that the other person hit the brakes too soon. And not only does that line up with the narrative of Harry and Taylor and what happened with them, but it also lines up with a few lyrics from Where Do Broken Hearts Go, which has a few select and highly suspicious parallels to this song, where Harry says, all the rest of my crimes don't come close to the look on your face when I let you go, meaning he was the one that ended the relationship. And he also says, shadows come with the pain that you're running from. And in Out of the Woods, she says, but the monsters turned out to be just trees, which is the monsters are the shadows, and you think you're seeing monsters, but really it's just trees. The shadow imagery is also there. I get that might be a reach, but also in Where Do Broken Hearts Go, the entire theme is that he broke someone's heart and now he realizes that he shouldn't have and is trying to get them back, also about an on and off relationship. So food for thought there. Taylor also says, last December, we were built to fall apart, then fall back together. They started dating in November-ish, and then around January, like the very beginning of January, they broke up, and one might assume that in December there was a little turmoil, and that lines up with the timeline of their relationship. Once again, they were breaking up and getting back together, etc. Finally, this song has references to other Taylor songs that I'd like you to keep in mind as we go through these. She says, the night we couldn't quite forget when we decided to move the furniture so we could dance. First of all, there's a video of her dancing with Harry, but there's no, like, she dances with a lot of people. So I don't think that is necessarily proof, but there is a video. And some people say they have no shoes on. And in Maroon, coincidentally, Taylor says the one I was dancing with in New York, no shoes. We'll discuss that later. She also says, but the rest of the world was black and white, but we were in screaming color, which is an interesting reference to a lot of her songs where she uses this metaphor and juxtaposition, but also a reference to Question, I don't remember who I was before you painted all my nights, a color I've searched for since. We will also discuss that later. Moving on. The next song is Clean, and the first lyric we see is, it was months and months of back and forth, which is a pretty obvious reference to an on and off relationship that we've seen in these past few songs. She also says, you're still all over me like a wine-stained dress I can't wear anymore, which is an interesting reference to Maroon, where she says, the burgundy on my t-shirt when you splashed your wine into me. There's also a lyric in Olivia, a song by One Direction, which says, "This isn't the stain of a red wine, I'm bleeding, love." And they use this spilling wine on the other person lyric, I feel like, a lot more than they should. There's also some other suspicious lyrics in Olivia, but I thought I'd just bring it up. She also says, "When the butterflies turned to dust that covered my whole room." And then also in Olivia, it says, "The summertime and butterflies all belong to your creation." She also says very specifically, 10 months sober, I must admit, just because you're clean don't mean you don't miss it, which is, as I said, a very particular amount of time. I couldn't find exactly if there was anything happening like 10 months after January, so that would be what, like October? Yeah, I don't think anything really special happened in October of 2013, but if I'm wrong, correct me on that. But anyway, you might be wondering, why do you think the song is about Harry, or why does it deserve to be in the first tier? And I'll answer, because when she was talking about Clean, Taylor said, "Clean I wrote as I was walking out of Liberty in London. Someone I used to date, it hit me that I'd been in the same city as him for 2 weeks and I hadn't thought about it. When it did hit me, it was like, oh, I hope he's doing well, and nothing else." And how it is when you're going through heartbreak, a heartbroken person is unlike any other person. Harry had a residence in London in 2013. In fact, he primarily lived there. He is British, and I think that is personally enough proof for me, especially given the theme of this song, which is finally getting over this on and off relationship. So that's what happened at the end of the 10 months, I guess. She also said that Shake It Off and Clean were the last 2 songs that she wrote for the 1989 album, which also lines up with the timeline because she would have written this way after she and Harry had broken up. Moving on to the next tier. The next song is I Know Places, and let's dive into the lyrics here. She says, "It's a scene and we're out here in plain sight. I can hear them whisper as we pass by. It's a bad sign. Somebody happens when everybody finds out. See the vultures circling dark clouds. Love's a little fragile flame. It could burn out." I wonder what that's referencing. I think it's referencing the media. The media is the vultures. She often portrays them this way, and it is very clearly a song about the press ruining a relationship. She also says, "Lights flash and we'll run for the fences. Let them say what they want. We won't hear it." I think this is self-explanatory. She also says, "In the dead of night, your eyes so green." And there was one other person that had green eyes from this time frame who she dated, and it was Connor Kennedy, one of the Kennedys, who I actually did not know about, but she was briefly linked to him in 2012 before Harry. But like, come on, I don't think she was thinking about Connor Kennedy, and there was also not that much publicity surrounding her and Connor Kennedy, or like actively trying to ruin their relationship. Because with Harry, it was all of the One Direction girls being like, "What the hell, why are you dating Taylor?" So it was extra rough for them. Moving on to Wonderland. Wonderland also has a reference to green eyes. She says, "Didn't you flash your green eyes at me?" Now, there's another person actually that people thought this could be about who has green eyes, and it is Diana Agron, who was Taylor's friend at the time, and people thought the song was about her because not only does she have greenish eyes, but she had an Alice in Wonderland tattoo. And to that, I have to say, first of all, Taylor has said that she's straight, unless I am very mistaken, but I feel like she has. And second of all, Diana literally had her Wonderland tattoo removed after this song came out, so that should really tell you something about the fact that she really didn't want to associate with the song or with potentially dating Taylor. Another dead giveaway in the song that this is about Harry Styles for me was "Didn't you call my fears with a Cheshire cat smile?" And for people that haven't like watched a lot of interviews with Harry Styles, or people that haven't seen a lot of pictures with him generally, they might think that I'm just generalizing, but I'm not. He has one of the like widest smiles I've ever seen, and if I were to describe anybody's smile as a Cheshire cat smile, it would be him. I will put a comparison up on the screen, okay? Like, I think this is a very accurate way. And finally, she says, "I reached for you, but you were gone. I knew I had to go back home. You searched the world for something else." And she says, essentially here, that the other person broke it off first, which lines up once again with the narrative of her and Harry. Next up is I Wish You Would, and the main reason that I Wish You Would is in this tier is because Taylor said in an interview that Style and another song on 1989 were about a crooked love. And in I Wish You Would, she literally says, "We're a crooked love in a straight line down," which I think is a pretty obvious giveaway. She also mentions headlights and being in a car in the middle of the night, which is a theme that we really saw was prevalent in Out of the Woods. When describing what the song was about, Taylor said, okay, so this is an idea called I Wish You Would. It's about this guy who's like, he's driving down the street at the middle of the night and he passes his ex-girlfriend's house. And it's like, he thinks she hates him, but she's still in love with him. Very dramatic. This track is sick. Hope you like this. And also, you can read the full thing if you want, but I'll just skim over the important details. It's rumored that Harry actually bought a house right next to Taylor's in LA a few months after they broke up, which is what the song is about. And also, rumor has it that at the 1989 listening party, Taylor gave away all these details that you can read here. I don't know if I trust this completely, but the theory goes that the song is about like Harry living that close to her and driving by her house. Next up is How You Get the Girl, and the lyric that was suspicious to me in this one was, say it's been a long 6 months. Now, as I said, Taylor and Harry met in March 2012 and then reconnected again in September before they eventually started dating in November. And there's photos in public to prove this. And that was literally a exact 6-month period. So I think that is highly suspicious. In a Glam interview, Taylor also said, How You Get the Girl is a song about how when we're young, which most of my friends and most of my peers are, a lot of the time you'll take for granted a really good relationship and let go of it and go out in the world and then realize you want it back. And this song is an instruction manual for a guy who has broken up with his girlfriend and let 6 months go by and the lengths he'll need to go to get her back. And it's not just as simple as sending a text message. It's not like, sup, miss you. That's not going to work. You need to do all the right things in the song. Now, she and Harry didn't necessarily have a relationship back in March, but I think this song could have been very well heavily inspired by that whole situation because he did come back 6 months later and then eventually they did start dating. So food for thought. Moving on. The next song is It Over Now, which is a vault track from 1989 that was released recently. And the reason that this song may have stayed in the vault, maybe it was because the record thought it wasn't that good at the time, or maybe it was because she said blue dress on a boat, which was directly referencing a photo that was circling around the internet so much that Taylor had to have known about its existence. And the rumor had it that she was coming back on this boat alone from a vacation that she took with Harry when they split. And so that is a very direct reference in there. She also says, You dream of my mouth before it called you a lying traitor, which is off from the vibe. It seems a little bit more aggressive than the songs we've seen so far, but it's all right. Maybe she just got angry. She also says, Baby, was it over when she laid down on your couch? Was it over when he unbuttoned my blouse? Which is also a theme that we saw in Style, where she asks her partner about the girls she knows he's been seeing, but she says that she's been in the same situation as well. And here we have the same theme of them being with other people and also a very on and off relationship because they're getting with other people, but they still don't know if it's over yet. She also mentions the media in this song and another person having a very high profile. She says, and did you think I didn't see you? There were flashing lights. At least I had the decency to keep my nights out of sight, which is also, I think, a very direct reference to Harry because he was papped a lot in the news at the time out with other women. And here she's essentially saying that, hey, at least you didn't have to see me going on about my dates and the people I was dating, but I had to see you. There's also a lyric that says, your new girl is my clone, and if she's got blue eyes, I will surmise that you'll probably date her, which is referenced in From the Dining Table, where Harry says, woke up the girl who looked just like you, I almost said your name. Maybe that song is about Taylor, maybe it isn't, but I thought it was an interesting coincidence. Moving on to Maroon from the Midnights album, and out of all the recently released songs, I think this one just absolutely screams Harry, because once again, she says, oh, your necklace hanging from my neck. As we know, she and Harry had those matching necklaces. She also says the one I was dancing with in New York. There's a video of them dancing in New York. Some people say they don't have any shoes on. I don't know if I trust that. But anyway, she mentioned dancing in Out of the Woods. And I think that's a very specific instance that she used in her songs with him. She also says the burgundy on my t-shirt when you splashed your wine into me, which is referenced in Clean and Olivia. As I've stated before, there's just a lot of references to other songs about Harry in this song. And then she also says the mark that you saw on my collarbone, the rust that grew between telephones. First of all, this is directly on theme with the previous song as well as Style with them going out with other people, but also there's a reference in From the Dining Table to this as well, where Harry says, even my phone misses your call, by the way. I think that people calling each other is a pretty common theme. I'm not saying that it's unique to their relationship, but I'm also saying that they have very busy lives and very busy schedules. So it makes sense that calling on the phone would be a big part of their relationship, especially when they had to go long distance. She also says you were standing hollow-eyed in the hallway. And Harry literally has a song called Meet Me in the Hallway. That's a whole thing I think I'll get into in another video where I discuss Harry songs about Taylor, but we'll just keep that in mind. The primary reason I think Maroon is about Harry is sort of the combination of these things and the fact that these lyrics don't really look like they could be referencing anybody else. Taylor said about Midnights that it's a story of 12 sleepless, or however many sleepless nights throughout her life, indicating that she wrote some of these songs about things that happened way back in the past, and she did write a song, I think, that was referencing situations that very clearly happened like a while ago, especially when she was dating a person that was much older than her. There was a song all about that on Midnights. So it's very plausible that this is a song from that time frame, and also I don't think this could be referencing anybody else because she says, when the silence came, we were shaking blind and hazy. How the hell did we lose sight of us again? Sobbing with your head in your hands, ain't that the way shit always ends? Which is indicative of a very on and off relationship, which she only had with Harry in this caliber, plus all the references to him, plus the only other person that I think this could be about is Matty Healy, and I did discuss this song in a video about him that I made earlier, but I just don't think this describes her and Matty Healy's relationship back in 2014, just because that was a more of a wrong timing and, oh, I wonder what would happen if we met later thing, rather than a very tumultuous relationship. Moving on to the third tier, evidence? No. Vibes? Absolutely. First up is Now That We Don't Talk, which is another vault track from 1989, in which Taylor says, you grew your hair long, which is also a very specific reference that really, I think, could only be referencing Harry, but it's not specific enough as to where I can definitively say that the song is about Harry, but he literally did grow his hair long right after in 2014, which was like the year after they broke up. She also says, you got new icons and from the outside it looks like you're trying lives on, which, I mean, I guess you can once again hear about a person through your friends, but to me, I think that's more referencing somebody that's in the public eye and somebody that she can really keep track of through the media and see what they're doing. She also says, what do you tell your friends we share dinners, long weekends with? First of all, they're mutual friends with Ed Sheeran, and second of all, Taylor hung out with One Direction a lot as a whole, and she's still friends with Niall. She had him come on stage at one of her shows. She also says, or that I'd like to be on a mega yacht, which is a fun reference to, I think, the boat trip they took, but maybe it's just a coincidence. Anyway, this song is just about missing somebody and all the things you don't know about somebody now that you don't talk with them. And it's not really that specific, so we can't assume too much. Next up is This Love, which maybe should have gone in the previous tier, but now it's here, so we're gonna deal with it. This describes a very on and off relationship. She says, clear blue water, high tide came and brought you in, similar to You Fade Into View. And then she says, skies grew darker, currents swept you out again, and you were just gone and gone. Pretty self-explanatory. She also has a fun parallel to both Clean and Wildest Dreams, where she says, in silent screams and in wildest dreams, which is something that she does throughout the whole 1989 album. She also says these hands had to let it go free, which is similar to what she says when in Out of the Woods, where she says, I walked out, I said, I'm setting you free. The same theme of her ending the relationship for her or their own good. The reason I put the song in the third tier is because it was written in October 17th of 2012, which is weird because they hadn't really started dating yet, but also I think this could just be referencing the fact that they got together and they were on and off and they weren't official, so maybe in September, October, they were still figuring this out, and in November they finally got together, or maybe they got together in October and we don't know. But anyway, this is about letting a love go and then it coming back to you, which I think is pretty plausible given their timeline. Speaking of timing, Taylor said about this song, This Love is a song that I wrote early on in this process, and it was the first time I started experimenting with different vocal recording styles. In this case, I wanted it to sound haunting, and so I sang the song differently than I've sung most of my other songs. I recorded it differently. You can have multiple vocals going through the entire song. It's about an experience I had where if you truly care about someone and you know they're not ready to be in a relationship, you will let them go, and it sucks to be the one that has to let something go and cut someone loose when you don't want to. But I think you have to be selfless in relationships when you know that it's not the right time, and if you make that decision and that person is supposed to be in your life, they'll come back. And this was the way that I felt when that time came back around, which is what I said about these lyrics in the first place. But there's an interesting narrative going here because there is a song called I Love You by Alex and Sierra, which was released in 2014 and has a very strange ghostwriter by the name of a Mick Greenberg. When asked about who Mick Greenberg was, Alex and Sierra said, "We were told that Mick Greenberg wrote it. That was what we were told. That's all we know. It could be Shaq. We don't know. Shaquille O'Neal might have written it." They also said maybe Mick and Taylor are really good friends. Maybe Mick and Taylor even had a fling. What I'm getting at is that most people believe that Mick Greenberg is the writing alias for Harry Styles, and Harry Styles wrote the song, and it just wasn't released under One Direction. There's an abundant amount of hints to Taylor in the song, which is why people think that the song is about him. He says, "While we lay there on the soft, warm ground for a week and 13 days. First of all, now I'm lying on the cold, hard ground. Trouble. Hello." But second of all, for a week and 13 days. So 13 is like Taylor's favorite number. Everybody knows this. She had it written on her hand when she was doing, I think, the Speak Now tours. Anyway, just a lot of "I knew you were trouble" references, the 13 reference. And also he says, "Maybe if I got my timing right, I wouldn't end up alone," which is very telling and matches up with the theme of this love. Just thought I'd bring it up. Next up is All You Had to Do Was Stay, which is reportedly written on January 10th, 2013, which was like literally right after the Harry breakup. What do we know from the lyrics? We know that the other person ended it because she says, "All I know is that you drove us off the road." Also, actually, another vehicle reference right in there. And there's also a lot of references to an on and off relationship, and that's sort of all we have to go off of for this song, but I think it's enough. She says, "Hey, now that you don't want it back, now that it's just too late, I've been picking up the pieces of the mess you made. People like you always want back the love they pushed aside, but people like me are gone forever when you say goodbye," which also matches up with the theme of this love that we just talked about, where a person was like, it wasn't the right time for their relationship, but then they came back and she was reluctant to get them back. This is also something that we talked about in How You Get the Girl, where she literally gave him a set of instructions and was like, "Hey, you don't get me back that easily, after you broke my heart." And we can see a narrative forming here. If all these songs are really about Harry, they really make sense together. Next up is I Knew You Were Trouble, which is from the Red album, which is why it is suspicious, and I put it in the third tier because it was first played live on October 8th, 2012, which is right around the time that Taylor and Harry, they reconnected in September, and something was going on in October. But what gives me strange vibes about the song is the fact that it's very aggressive, I think, for that point in their relationship. But then again, I don't really know what their actual timeline was, so it is very plausible that this song was still about them. I Knew You Were Trouble could only really be about Harry if she was angry enough when they first met and flirted around but didn't officially date. If she was angry enough about that and he betrayed her enough to write this song. Otherwise, it's not about their relationship, because all the main Harry breakup stuff happened in January. She says, "And when I fell hard, you took a step back without me." So the other person broke it off first again. She also says, "Because I knew you were trouble when you walked in, flew me to places I've never been till you put me down." Once again, the other person ended it. But also, this has very similar vibes to when she says, "The rest of the world was black and white, but we were in screaming color." Sort of this person taking her to places they've never been, etc. This also has a very similar vibe to Perfect by One Direction, in my opinion, where it says, "And if you like midnight driving with the windows down," once again, a car reference, "and if you like going places we can't even pronounce, if you'd like to do whatever you've been dreaming about, then baby, you're perfect." Sort of talking about going to places or doing things that you've never done with this person, but it being a momentary, fleeting thing. He also says, "When I first saw you from across the room, I could tell that you were curious," which lines up with the lyric, "Because I knew you were trouble when you walked in." This song also has a mention of the press. She says, I heard you moved on from Whispers on the Street," Whispers on the Street being the press. She also issued a public thank you when she won an award for this song at the VMAs and said thank you to the person that wrote the song, and Harry was at the 2013 VMAs, so a lot of people thought she was talking about him. And about the song, she said, "You're balancing the analytical side of your brain, which is telling you where to go and how to go there, with the other side of your brain, which is saying, feel everything you're singing and show it on your face. Feel everything exactly as you felt it when you wrote the song," Swift said. "Well, it's not hard to access that emotion when the person the song is directed at is standing by the side of the stage watching," which is, once again, a reference to perhaps the 2013 VMAs where Harry was present. I don't know who else would be watching her by the side of the stage that she wrote a song about that's present at musical awards. But anyway, Moving on to Gold Rush from Evermore. It's very hard to pinpoint songs from this era in general, let me just say, so take all of this with a grain of salt. A lot of these songs are actually not all based on real situations and Taylor just thought them up in her head, but I do think that she pulls a lot of inspiration from certain situations in her past, and I think that is the case with Gold Rush. Gold Rush actually points to a lot of her relationships, but there's certain references in the song that make it more likely to be about Harry than her other relationships. First of all, in This Love, she says, on sinking ships in wildest dreams, I never dreamed of this. She starts off Gold Rush by saying, eyes like sinking ships on waters, so inviting, I almost jump in, which is suspicious. The whole name of the song, Gold Rush, is also reminiscent of the song that Harry wrote, which is called Golden, which was released like half a year or a year before this in 2019. Just thought I mentioned that, but the main theme of the song is Taylor admiring somebody that's wanted by everybody from a distance and being unable to be with them and not liking how caught off guard she is by this person. Now, who are the three people this could be about, first of all? Well, this could be about Maddie Healy. My arguments for that are, she says, I call you out on your contrarian shit, which doesn't really apply to Harry because he's very uncontroversial, and I don't know if this applies to Joe because we don't really know much about Joe, but once again, we don't really hear much about him, so my assumption is that he's not very problematic. My second argument for Maddie is that she said that she swirled him into all of her poems, aka she wrote a ton of songs about him, so whenever we see a weird song about an old flame, chances are it's probably about Maddie because she was thinking about him a bunch, which is evident because she got back together with him in 2023, and Maddie is obviously a public figure, so the lyrics, anybody would die to feel your touch, could be talking about him. However, it's less likely that that is referencing him than the fact that that is referencing Harry Styles, because I think the One Direction fan base and Harry Styles' fan base as a whole is much more about, oh my god, he's gorgeous and like I want to date him. Maybe not now, but in the One Direction days that was definitely the case. He was like the it guy that everybody wanted to date, whilst with Maddie Healy there's a select fan base that really thinks he's all that, and they really like him, but it's not the same as everybody would die to feel your touch, which is, I think, is a sentiment that is very particular to Harry Styles around the 2013, 2015 era. Let's think about why this could be about Joe. In Gorgeous, which I think is pretty evidently about Joe, Taylor says, you're so gorgeous I can't say anything to your face because look at your face, which is very similar to the sentiment in this song. She also says, ocean blue eyes looking in mine, I feel like I might sink and drown and die. So the eyes like sinking ships reference isn't really that unique because she's also used it in reference to Joe in her songs. And she also says, there's nothing I hate more than what I can't have, which is a similar vibe to this song. And also finally, he was a player when she met him, so by anybody dying to feel his touch, she couldn't mean not necessarily fans, but just that he was involved with a lot of women and a lot of women were into him at the time, maybe, perhaps. But even given all that, I think most likely this song is about Harry, given once again the lyrics, I don't like that anyone would die to feel your touch, because I find it strange that she would write those lyrics about anybody else. I think those lyrics fit him the best. She also says, I don't like anticipating my face in a red flush, which is something that she also talks about in Maroon when she says, and how the blood rushed into my cheeks, so scarlet it was. Moving on to Slut, which is a vault track from 1989, one of my favorites, dare I say. In it, she says, aquamarine swimming pool. And in Trouble, which is an unreleased One Direction song that was written by Harry, it says, I still taste the time we kissed upon my lips swimming in the blue, which also references swimming in a pool, which is a specific thing. Now, remember when I was talking about Harry and Taylor being invited to Justin Bieber's house the week they first met? Well, supposedly her and Harry and One Direction went swimming there, and also it was Justin Bieber's LA mansion, and this lines up with these lyrics, Flamingo Pink, Sunrise Boulevard, Moonlit Swimming Pool, and if Harry mentioned it in his song as well, that is just sort of too good of a coincidence. So this is why I think it could be about Harry potentially. It also has media references. If I'm all dressed up, they might as well be looking at us. And if they call me a slut, they being the media, it might be worth it for once. Now, there is something off about the song, which is that she says the wrong place at the right time, which is the opposite sentiment of what we've received in previous songs, where it's all about it was actually the wrong time, but, the right person. But I think maybe this just rhymed or something. I don't know. But she makes up for this lyric by saying, everyone wants him, that was my crime, which is exactly what she says in Gold Rush. I should have mentioned this when I was describing Gold Rush as well, but I think this indicates that this song is probably about Harry and also the media attention around that relationship once again. Moving on to August from Folklore, the reason that I spotted this song was because of I Love You by Alex and Sierra, which we just talked about, where Harry also says Mick Greenberg also says, you ran your finger down my back and you spelled out your name while we laid there on the soft, warm ground for a week and 13 days. First of all, soft, warm ground, week and 13 days references a brief summer, fling, warm ground, short period of time, references also, I Knew You Were Trouble and Taylor's favorite number. But also in August, Taylor says, you're back beneath the sun, wishing I could write my name on it, which is almost identical to the lyrics in I Love You by Alex and Sierra. I also have to mention the fact that people didn't just randomly assume that a random name on a song was Harry Styles just because it had some Taylor specific things. The other writer on this song was Johan Carlson. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but point is he worked on a ton of One Direction songs and I think wrote on other songs that Harry wrote for other artists, such as A Little Bit of Your Heart, which eventually went to Ariana Grande. So Harry has literally worked with the other person that was writing on the song, so people assumed that Mick Greenberg would be him because there is no record of another Mick Greenberg songwriting anywhere. He just appeared for that one song and left. So it's not completely baseless accusations. In I Love You, it also says, I fell in love in the morning sun while the hours slipped away. First of all, morning sun references summertime and a warm period because usually you don't go out in the winter and see the morning sun. But it also references time as slipping away, and Taylor says August slipped away like a bottle of wine in August. It's also another bottle of wine mentioned because she mentions rosé in both Maroon and also spilling wine in the bunch of other songs that we saw. There's also a theme of the other person not being as into it when she says, because you were never mine, and for me, wanting was enough, indicating that for the other person, it wasn't. She also says, back when we were still changing for the better, indicating that this relationship happened a while ago. The main kind of stopper in the song for me is the fact that there was literally nothing happening with Taylor and Harry in August, but I think in this case she might just be using August because it sounded good in the song and because it was indicative of a brief summer romance. That doesn't mean that the romance actually had to happen in the summer. It just had to happen in a warm place where you can trace someone's back, and it had to be brief, and maybe the vibes she felt were summer. Anyway, I found that the parallels to I Love You by Alex and Sierra in the song were a little bit strange and a little bit too specific, but other than that, I really don't have anything to go off of, and it's folklore, so it could be entirely fictional and we would never know. Next up is Say Don't Go from 1989. And this song is in the third tier because the vibe is different from the previous songs where it's an on and off relationship and Taylor had to let Harry go and he came back to her and it was tumultuous, etc., etc. Because in Say Don't Go, she literally just keeps saying, why'd you whisper in the dark just to leave me in the night? And I said I love you, you say nothing back, which I think is slightly a different dynamic than a relationship being on and off. This is sort of more about an unrequited love, but still it could be about how she felt at a certain moment with Harry. We don't know. There's also a car reference in this song. She says, I wait for you to drive by. I'm trying to see the cars that you won't show. This is referenced in Style, You Pick Me Up, No Headlights. It's referenced in I Wish You Would, It's 2 a.m. in Your Car. I think I mentioned a couple other mentions of cars in other songs about Harry that I missed here. Point being, she likes mentioning cars when she's talking about him. And she also says, halfway out the door, but it won't close. I'm holding out hope for you to say don't go, which is a similar vibe to the couple songs we saw where she mentioned leaving the relationship in order to save it and save herself, like in This Love, where she let the relationship go and it came back to her. Finally, I'm just going to mention Blank Space. First of all, it's giving perfect vibes when she says, so hey, let's be friends. I'm down to see how this one ends. Grab your passport in my hand. I can make the bad guys good for a weekend. Going away for a weekend, showing or doing all these things with a person for just a non-permanent amount of time and just having fun with them and it not being a serious relationship. But second of all, she says, so it's going to be forever or it's going to go down in flames. And about this lyric, Taylor said, I was on a boat once and I came up with the line, so it's going to be forever or it's going to go down in flames. flames, and I didn't use it for about a year until I was writing Blank Space, and I was like, and it's theorized that this is about the same blue dress boat where she was coming back from her breakup with Harry Styles, and that's where she thought of this lyric. And then this lyric is also referenced, as we pointed out, in Style. So I think the song was partly inspired by Harry. I don't think that this song is about Harry, but I think the premise for it materialized on that boat. And as she said later, she just wrote the rest of the song where when she was over the breakup, and it became about, it like turned into a completely different thing, because Blank Space is essentially, it doesn't seem like it's about a specific person. It's more about the like making fun of the media's perception of her and how she's like this like terrible person to get into relationships with. But point being, it's not really about a romantic partner, but I think the idea materialized when she was breaking up with Harry. Finally, we're on to the fourth tier, My Voice is Dying, which is the honorary mentions tier. These are, once again, the songs that I think a lot of people theorize to be about Harry, but actually aren't, in my opinion. And don't skip this tier. It's a fun tier because it inevitably opens up the window of, well, if this song isn't about Harry, well, then who is it about? So let's get started. The first one and the most well-known one is Wildest Dreams. Some people think it's about Harry because of the media references, where she says, I said no one has to know what we do, which is a very similar vibe to Style and Out of the Woods. She also says in the very beginning of the song, let's get out of this town, drive out of the city, away from the crowds, which is a very clear media reference as well. She also said about this song in a Rolling Stone interview, I think the way I used to approach relationships was very idealistic. I used to go into them thinking maybe this is the one, we'll get married and have a family, this could be forever. Whereas now I go in thinking, how long do we have on the clock before something comes along and puts a wrench in it, or your publicist calls and says this isn't a good idea. Now, at first glance, this is very reminiscent of the issues she had to face with Harry. But if we look closer at the lyrics, this starts to make less sense in the Harry Styles context. She says, and so when we've had our very last kiss, my last request is say you'll remember me standing in a nice dress, say you'll see me again, even if it's just in your wildest dreams, and you'll see me in hindsight tangled up with you all night, which is, first of all, a slightly different vibe, but second of all, I think it's more talking about a short fling, it sounds like, than an on and off relationship. Here it sounds like she's almost fine with letting this person go as long as she knows that they'll keep her in their mind and like occasionally remember her. The main reason, or the main way to prove this isn't about Harry, is to think about who it could be about. And there's a particular fan theory that blew my mind when I read the Tumblr post, and I'll link it in the description. But essentially, the music video for Wildest Dreams is very specific. It was filmed in Africa. In it, Taylor was brunette, and she was playing an actress that had a secret thing for the actor that she was starring in the movie in. It was like a secret romance between two castmates. That was the premise of the music video. And coincidentally, Taylor was cast in The Giver, which was filmed in Africa, in which Taylor's character is brunette as well, like there's photos. And on set, she happened to get very close with an actor called Alexander, I'm not gonna say his last name, and she got like papped with him. They weren't kissing or anything, but like they were hanging out at their hotels and such. And this guy also happens to be 6'4". So when she says he's so tall and handsome as hell, maybe she means that he was like really goddamn tall. Because if we're talking about Harry Styles is 6 foot, which is tall, but considering that Taylor is like 5'10", he's not that tall. If somebody is 6'4", he is so tall. So I think given the specificity of the music video for Wildest Dreams, it is very plausible that the song is not about Harry at all and is instead about this Alexander that she filmed The Giver with, which is very interesting. So it was like this, if this is what the song is about, it fits into the narrative of it being a fling that nobody knew about and it being very brief and them deciding that essentially it wouldn't work and the publicity wasn't worth it and just like generally, yeah, the timing not working out. Next up is Suburban Legends, which is a vault track from 1989. She says, you had people who called you on unmarked numbers in my peripheral vision, which lines up with the story of her and Harry and the other people they were involved with. She also says, I broke my own heart because you were too polite to do it, which also lines up with a Harry narrative as well, where she tried to end the relationship because he wasn't ready or something like that. But she also says, when you told me we'd get back together, which is something that I haven't heard in her lyrics in songs that we've decided are about Harry, because it sounds more like this person promised that they'd get back together, whereas with Harry it sounds like he went away because he wanted to explore and then realized what he lost and came back and was finally ready for a relationship, at least for a brief time. But anyway, this sounds like the opposite of what was going on. Now, the premise of the song is that we could be suburban legends. She says, I had the fantasy that maybe our mismatched star signs would surprise the whole school when I ended up back at our class reunion walking with you, which is strange because she's talking about being a suburban legend with this person and getting talked about and surprising everyone. And that is what happened with Harry, but it wasn't because their star signs were, quote, mismatched. It was because they both had a really, public following and people were into both of their dating lives. But here she says mismatched star signs, which makes me think that this could possibly be about another person, namely Maddie Healy, with whom she really does have mismatched star signs in the sense that he is the very stereotypical image of a bad boy, an image that that Harry didn't have at the time when he was with her. But with Maddie, this mismatched star sign reference would make sense because they were literally polar opposites. And even when they got together in 2013 or 2023, people were like, what the hell, why is she with him? Because they're just so different. So this could be about the time when she met him in 2014. And so these several lyrics, including you'd be more than a chapter in my old diaries with the pages ripped out, which screams more one-time fling than like this great big on and off relationship that caused her a lot of turmoil. So yeah, given the fact that I've analyzed a lot of her songs about Maddie Healy, I'm gonna go with the theory that this one is about Maddie, but feel free to speculate, and maybe it's about Harry, maybe it's about somebody else, who knows. Moving on to questions, I'm rejecting it for the very same reason. A lot of people thought this was about Harry because she says, I remember at the very beginning of the song, which is also how she starts Out of the Woods. It's a curious choice, I'll give you that. But there's a lot of very specific lyrics in this song that reference Maddie in general. I'll give you a few examples, but if you're really interested, you can go watch my video where I go over literally all the songs that she's written about him. But namely, she says, but you were on something, which really doesn't scream Harry Styles in 2012, 2013 to me. I mean, he was 18, he wasn't on any substances. Meanwhile, Maddie Healy was known for doing drugs and then recovering from that. She also says fucking politics and gender roles and you're not sure and I don't know, which granted could reference media politics with Harry, but also there was a whole thing with Maddie Healy where he said he wouldn't date her because it would be too emasculating, and then had to say that he didn't mean it like that and had to apologize. And it was this whole thing, essentially he didn't want to date her because the publicity was too much, and that was the politics and gender roles of that situation, which she references also in her other songs about Maddie. She also says, and what's that I heard that you're still with her, which could be referencing Harry, I guess, and the relationships he had with other people that she saw in the media. But this seems to be referencing a specifically more lengthy period of time, like you're still with her. It's more like she's waiting for this person. It's less so like she's seeing this person dating other people right after they break up. It's more like she's waiting for him to ask him this question. She also says, she goes on this really strange rant in the chorus. Did you leave her house in the middle of the night? Did you wish you'd put up more of a fight when she said it was too much? Do you wish you could still touch her? It's just a question. I think this is talking about a very specific instance that happened that only Taylor knows about, but still the vibe is different from the on and off relationship that we've seen with Harry. There is one reference to Out of the Woods, which I find peculiar. First of all, I remember, but second of all, because I don't remember who I was before you painted all my nights, a color I've searched for since. Meanwhile, in Out of the Woods, she says the rest of the world was black and white, but we were in screaming color. So the first paragraph definitely screams Out of the Woods, but also, first of all, she throws in stuff to confuse people, and second of all, color references are they're not rare in her discography, but we'll leave it at that. Maybe this one's about Maddie, maybe this one's about Harry. I thought it was highly suspicious, so I put it in the 4th tier, but maybe I'm rethinking that. But also, yeah, go watch my other video. Finally, we have the one on folklore, which is being rejected for the very same reason. I was looking for songs that might be about Harry on folklore, and I put this one up because it simply had a mention of rosé, which is mentioned in Maroon, when she says, "How would we end up on the floor anyway? You say your roommate's cheap ass screw top rosé, that's how." But looking at the other lyrics, this song, first of all, seems to be a little bit too serious to be about Harry, in the sense that this was written in 2020 or in 2019, but it's talking about how this person from her past could have been the one. While she could have missed him after her relationship with him in 2013, I don't think still in 2020 her attitude towards Harry was like, oh my god, he could have been the one. But that was her attitude about Maddie Healy, evidently, because she eventually got back together with him in 2023. She also says in this song, "Roaring 20s, tossing pennies in the pool." She was 22 when she was in her relationship with Harry, so maybe she's referring to herself there. But Harry was 18, so they weren't exactly both in their, roaring 20s. Meanwhile, when she met Maddie, they were both in their roaring 20s. She also says, "You meet some woman on the internet and take her home," and Maddie's band has an album that's literally called A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, so I think that is referencing that. And yeah, there's also grave references, which I mentioned in my video about all the songs about Maddie. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and leave a comment about anything you want down below.